enthusiasts around the world. Houston reports a good deploy to ensure no recontact with the International Space Station. SUTSAT's orbit will decay in a few weeks, where it will then enter the Earth's atmosphere and burn up.
ISS to Houston, this is Commander Diaz. Do we have any debris close to our trajectory?
Evening, Commander. Negative on that. Clear sailing as far as we can see down here. If there was any cause for alarm, you know we'd see it too. Your crew members can keep sleeping tight.
Well, I'm seeing something out there. I can't make it out, but whatever it is, it's getting closer.
Tell you, Commander, we're not anything.
Houston, repeat again. Can't be.
Diaz, copy. Commander Diaz, do you copy?
Houston, you're not gonna believe this. I'm picking up transmissions on the ham radio that sound identical to the SUTSAT experiment. And that debris, it's an Orlan spacesuit.
I'm not sure I'm hearing you right. Repeat that, Commander?
SUTSAT. I'm seeing SUTSAT.
You're mistaken, Diaz. SUTSAT re-entered the atmosphere and burned up years ago. It's impossible.
Yeah, I know it's impossible,
But I know what I'm saying. It's SUTSAT. It's come back. And it's not just in orbit. It's headed right for the ISS. You're not making any sense. Say that again? Commander. Man, you need to try
Up here, the sky is black. Up here, the sky is black.
Up here, the sky is black.
I need to alert the crew.
Diaz.
Hi folks, did you hear the news? Starting with Unreal Engine 5.2, the Unreal editor for Mac OS is built and distributed as a universal binary, providing native support for past generation Intel-based and current generation Apple Silicon-based Macs in a single package. Learn more about these tech developments at unrealengine.com/feed. Find out how Metaverse Entertainment used MetaHuman and Unreal Engine to create a natural, believable, and charming virtual K-pop band, creating a new wave in the genre that has garnered over 21 million views. Learn the choreography of the development of Maeve on the feed. While you're there, be inspired by the developer interview with Dog How Games and how it overcame monumental challenges to development and stayed true to its original ambition for Level 0, using their ingenuity, perseverance, passion, and the tools the studio skillfully leveraged within the Unreal Engine ecosystem. Cute monsters, treasures, and a franchise that has enthralled fans for 36 years. The latest in that franchise, Dragon Quest Treasures, developed by Square Enix and Tosei. Discover how they utilized Unreal Engine's blueprints, sequencer, and more to bring the spirit of treasure hunting to life. Stepping over to this week's Community Spotlights with this vibrant and stylized environment from senior 3D environment artist Salvatore Gambino and the team behind the upcoming game from Illuvium, Overworld. In this fantastical setting, you can see how they have strived for a cohesive, vertically designed monument of a map. Let them know what you think of Brightland Steps over on their art station. Speaking of stylized environments that reach for the heavens, environment and lighting artist Francisco Rivas has unveiled their latest exploration into stylized pieces, creating everything from scratch utilizing ZBrush, Quixel Mixer, Blender, and Unreal Engine to realize their inspiration. Learn more about living in the sky on the forums. Follow and feel the road of merchants traveling across the land and seasons with a futuristic twist. Take a trip to senior environment artist Victoria Zafarodnia's art station to dive into how they created adventures with comfort using Maya, Substance, ZBrush, and Unreal Engine for the ArtStation Challenge, Medieval Back and Forth. Thanks for watching this week's news and Community Spotlight.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inside Unreal, a weekly show where we learn, explore, and celebrate everything Unreal. I am your host, Tina, and today with me I have a couple of the incredible team from NVIDIA who are going to be going over some truly incredible things, if I might say so myself. So to start us off, Richard, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Oh, Richard, I think you might be muted, potentially? That's what chat is saying to me.
Does that work? Is
Um,
that it?
yes, I
No?
think so. There we go. No? Did we? Tell me,
Yep,
chat. Can
works,
you
I
hear
think.
now? Okay, we're good now.
I can be heard as working? We're there?
Yes, yes, you can be heard.
Okay.
It's okay.
Okay.
It's normally me that's muted. It's in fact, chat right now is even like, "Wow, Tina, it's not you for once."
Yeah. Oh, no worries. No, I thought we had this working a minute ago, but if it's working now, that's cool. Okay. Well, yeah. So my role at NVIDIA, first off, my name is Richard Calgill. I'm the RTX evangelist at NVIDIA. I specialize in the Unreal Engine. So my background is in game development. I spent a lot of time as a lighting artist and environment artist. That's sort of my specialty, and that's what I tend to understand the most. And yeah, today we're going to talk about DLSS 3 in the context of various Unreal 5 projects.
Awesome. Thank you so much for going through that twice. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
And then, Zach, would you like to tell us a little about yourself as well?
Sure, my name is Zach. I come from a background of visual effects, worked on films, commercials, music videos, all that good stuff. Have some game development experience working in VR, and now I'm currently at NVIDIA working alongside Richard as a product marketing manager. Whatever
There we
that
go.
means.
The dream team.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I know today we have so much to dive into and look into, but I believe that you brought a sizzle for us to see at the beginning of it all, right?
We did.
Awesome. Let's go ahead and pull that up, shall we? I I have to admit, I feel like I shouldn't say this because I feel like I'm not allowed to play favorites, but the NVIDIA sizzles are some of my favorites. They really are.
Thank you. Yeah. Like, yeah, a
They're
lot
so
of
beautiful.
people. Well, yeah, a lot of teams, a lot of people worked on all that content you see there. I mean, it kind of visually summarizes a lot of what we're trying to do at this company, right? Which is to advance graphics, especially the realm of real time graphics. So yeah, yeah, but it really pops, doesn't it? It's nice to watch.
Yes, it definitely does.
Yeah.
So, before we dive in, for anyone who might not be familiar, do you mind kind of walking through what DLSS is and what they can look forward to in regards to the upcoming third installment of it?
Yeah, of course. You can switch to my screen if you want. I'll make this visual too. I have the Unreal 5 city sample running. I think one of the best ways to talk about DLSS 3 is to show what it gives you. Like what are we trying to achieve and what is it going after? Um, DLSS 3, if you want to get technical, is basically three technologies. There's a super resolution aspect. That's the upscaling and image enhancement um, method that DLSS uses. So we call that super resolution. Excuse me. And yeah, that uses deep learning models to, like I said, upscale and improve the final image output quality. And another key component of DLSS 3 is frame generation. So that's basically the doubling of frame rate by using, again, AI algorithms to generate additional frames. So that's a fairly complex operation, but we can get more into those details as we go. And then the third component to this is a technology called reflex. And reflex is all about reducing system latency. The act of generating frames using deep learning um, and sort of creating new frames out of thin air means that the system is going to introduce a little bit of latency, and what Reflex does is claw back that latency addition to hopefully get you to like a net zero loss of latency. And I can demonstrate that here with this scene. So yeah, here I have the city sample. This is running on a 4070, by the way, so it's high end hardware, but not the highest end hardware. And you can see that it's getting I'm at native resolution, no DLSS 3, and it's getting almost 60 frames per second. This is pretty good. Um, uh, uh, but yeah, it's that's where the frame rate is at without DLSS 3. Now I have this on the tab key, so I'll swap to it. I'm going to turn on DLSS super resolution, just the super resolution part of DLSS 3, and you can see that took my frame rate from 60 frames per second to about 80. So about a 33% increase. Um, so that's pretty cool. And then by turning on the full DLSS 3 super resolution plus frame generation, I take my frame rate up to 140 in this case. The amount of gain is going to vary by the project. Some will be a little bit more, a little bit less, but this is about a 250% increase in frame rate. And you'll also notice in the top left corner, I'm tracking overall system latency. So if I switch back to native rendering, right, that's my system latency with sub 60 frame per second rendering. And then full DLSS 3 is about the same. Maybe it's going to depend. Like, it might be a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on the scene and the project and so forth. But you can see that the system latency is very close to native when everything is added up together. But yeah, like at a much higher frame rate. So yeah, any questions at this point, or any? I mean, because the scene is really cool, right? And it's fun to just run around in it.
Yeah.
But
I mean, the first, I think we can all agree that this is basically sorcery that you just performed in front of us.
yeah,
So
we're working on our black magic skills. Yeah,
yeah,
trying our best.
they're top notch. Yeah, you're doing good.
Yeah, a very difficult scene to render and simulate, right? Because this is the smaller version of the city level. But I'll just zoom out here. It's a fully simulated environment, right? With I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of vehicles and characters all walking around. You can see them down there in the distance.
Yeah.
And it's the frame rate's holding. Latency isn't dramatically increasing or decreasing. It's holding at about native levels. I'll switch back to
Definitely.
native. You can see that. Yeah.
If you're okay with answering real quick, I think everyone's wondering what your overall setup is. I know you said you were on the 4070, but do you mind also letting us know what resolution it's at and all that kind of good stuff?
Yeah, it's I'm in 1080p at the moment, but that's really just for the broadcast. I mean, you could run this at 1440, and it would scale reasonably well, right? Like with this hardware, you'd still be above 100 frame per second at 1440. I don't know the exact frame rate or what it would be, but it's right around there.
Yeah, I think the biggest
Very
thing
cool.
with when we decided to use this demo is we wanted to have something that everyone has access to. So we didn't want to use
Yeah.
any special cases like we're special, we have access to this hardware, or these, we optimize the scene. This, anybody can grab the city sample, and
Right.
a 4070 card especially as well is kind of a nice point for a lot of people to be able to get their hands on.
Right. To be more specific about the hardware, this is running on a Core i9 system, but it's an older CPU. It's not the latest one. I don't know the exact model, but it's got that. And the 4070 is an FE 12 gigabyte card. So fairly yeah, nothing like, it's beefy, right? The 4070 is pretty beefy, but it's not the highest end card that's currently available.
Mhm. I also, I do think it's worth pointing out when we were talking about this beforehand, you mentioned that this is this is even the smaller map.
Yes,
So
there
this
is
is
a
possible even at an even larger scale.
there is a crazier, yeah, the larger map, right? Which is, I don't know how much bigger it is. It's like, it seems to me like it's at least 8 times this area. It's just enormous. Um, I To be honest, I wasn't sure if it was going to successfully compile, because that, I mean, that is, it's so extreme, right? But that's sort of the point of the larger map, is that it's meant for, like, really high end hardware and that sort of thing. Um, but yeah, this one, uh, you know, uh, as big as it is, it still fits very comfortably on a 12 gigabyte card. Um, so yeah, I was, uh, but it always makes you just a little bit nervous, right? Because this is this is a nanite scene. There's billions of triangles being rendered. It's fully dynamic. The amount of simulation going on is crazy. And I Once I saw that it was working, I turned on hardware ray traced Lumen, so it's got ray traced reflections, hardware ray traced reflections, and GI going on. But that's the only part of it that's using hardware ray tracing. Um, the rest is just the default scene, basically.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Also, just to clarify for anyone in chat who's wondering, so DLSS 3 is not currently out yet, but this is upcoming, right?
Correct. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
we're in beta internally, and we're close to release, but not yet. We don't have a ship date or a release date yet. No, Zach, did you want to add to that at all?
No, yeah, you said it. Yeah, the release is upcoming, but the team is working hard and excited to get the product into the hands of everyone so that they can, start building and optimizing games, which is what everyone is waiting for.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
If you want, I can walk through some of that setup and procedure just a little bit. It's good for people to see exactly, sort of the nuts and bolts. We have everything pretty locked down as far as what the release is going to be. So it shouldn't change too much.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to walk through that if you're up for that. I think that would be
Yeah.
fun.
Okay. Yeah. So the way it works is, we have a. I'll start with this. From the marketplace, you could search for DLSS, and that'll come up with our DLSS, plugin product page, right? And on there's going to be an external link that'll take you to the NVIDIA website where you can download the package. So yeah, when you click that button, it'll load this page here, and it's fairly straightforward. There's some, you can download the plugin for UE. There's an end user license agreement to click through. Oh, that's for. There we go. That's the wrong. There's the right spot. So once I click on that, then I can download the the version of DLSS for whichever version of Unreal I want. We support all the way back to 4.26. But this, when we release, this will be updated with a 5.2 zip file that can be downloaded as well. Yeah, and so when you download the zip, it should look on the inside. It should look something like this. There'll be an installation guide at the top, and then some folders. We have a sample project, which is really good to go through. It gives you a lot of good examples of, like, how to set up blueprint scripting, some good proper setup, and then we have the plugins themselves. Like I said, DLSS 3 is multiple components, right? It's not just one plugin. There's DLSS. This is the super resolution part of it. Streamline contains both the updated frame generation and reflex. And this is an interesting topic by itself. is this folder is called, this plugin is called Streamline because that's the technology we're using to deliver that. NVIDIA has a technology called Streamline, which is, it's really meant to take multiple and different technologies and make it easy for you to integrate them into your engine and bundle them together. In this case, we're using Streamline to bundle frame generation and the latest version of Reflex into one plugin, and make it very easy to integrate and use. Um, so that's what that is. And then we have sort of a couple of support technologies, but still important. NIS, or NVIDIA image scaling, is you could think of it as DLSS without the deep learning aspect, right? So this is meant to be very backwards compatible and very cross-platform image upscaler. But it's important to DLSS super resolution because actually it has NIS has a very good sharpening method. And when if you, as a developer, when you're building out your interface and you have, like, say, um, a an image sharpener slider for the end user to use, what you're actually doing is calling NIS to do that. Um, so if you want users to be able to adjust sharpness, that's how you go about doing it. But it also gives you a good fallback, right? So for anybody who doesn't have RTX hardware, they could, you could detect that and have them fall back to NIS as one of their options. Um, and then DLSS movie pipeline support is just a sort of a supplemental plugin to DLSS that allows you to use DLSS super resolution with the movie render queue system, and that's it. That's all it does. But if you're, if you want to, um, you know, use MRQ to output, offline images, say with deep learning anti-aliasing, that's another part of DLSS, which is a high-res version of DLSS called DLAA, and if you wanted to use that with MRQ, would be the plugin to enable. I'm not an MRQ expert. I'm not going to get like too heavily into that one, but basically, there are all these plugins that you can install into your version of Unreal when you get the package. And then we have a documentation folder which just lays out everything. Right, there's the sort of the key things here for most people is going to be the quick start guides. They have very good information, for most use cases and tips and some installation procedures and things like that. The quick start guides are the very high level information, and then there's deeper documents like the programming guide, and if you're interested in the legal stuff, there's the EULA document, and so on. So and I can show some of that real quickly here. Like, here's the frame generation quick start guide. If you just skim through it, you'll see that it'll give you some tips on troubleshooting, known issues, like maybe some common problems you might run into, like if it's just not working out of the box, why that might be. So some things you can step through, and then some instructions on setting up your preferences and so forth. Plus a lot of common console commands and CVARs and uh, things like that. But yeah, so yeah, that's basically the package when you get it. And to install is actually really simple. You just want to go into your plugins right here, and you need to do a manual install. You're downloading the zip, do a manual install. But just go to, like, say, your wherever you've installed 5.2 at, go to UE52 engine, your plugins folder. And in here, if you don't have a marketplace folder already, you just make one. That's sort of the official install location for anything you download through the marketplace. And here I've already dropped the plugins in.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Richard.
Oh,
Super
it's okay.
quickly, not to interrupt.
Yeah.
I
Interrupt.
think our screen share might be frozen. If you don't mind, just restarting that real quick so we can make sure we're following along with everything you're showing us.
Okay. Okay.
Awesome. It's a
Oh yeah,
technical issue kind of week, you know?
sure.
Yeah, everything always works.
Yeah. Always perfectly, smoothly, without incident every time. While we're getting that set up, if you don't mind, there's a couple questions I might throw your way.
Okay.
One
Yeah.
of the first ones is about kind of a difference between DLSS 2 and DLSS 3, and they're kind of wondering what some of the big key differences are going to be between the two.
Mhm.
If you don't mind, kind of going into that a little bit.
Yeah, of course. DLSS2 was primarily the super resolution technology. Um, but there are other important differences. I mean, starting with DLSS3, we also have improvements to the underlying deep learning model with new presets that, like, different uh, 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 sort of optimized deep learning models that you can choose from, as well as just the algorithms themselves are dramatically improved in quality over DLSS2. Um, and there are some other differences, like DLSS3 does over-the-air updates. That's a new option for developers. So over-the-air is pretty neat. Like, in the past with DLSS2, a developer would have to, if we issued some refinement, some update to DLSS, they would have to get that latest version of DLSS and include it into their code, and then recompile a binary and issue an update, right? Another .1 update. Over the air updates, you don't have to do that anymore. You just check the box, and then as we um, uh, issue updates to DLSS3, users take advantage of them. So as we refine the model and do speed improvements and so forth, it would just be automatically there, and the developer would have a lot less work to do. Now, if a developer doesn't want to do that, if they want to lock in like what they have, just it's you just turn over the air option off, and you don't make use of it. But like I said, by default, it's on, and we think most people will want to use it.
Yeah. Awesome. I think we've got screen share back up and running if we want to hop back into that as well.
Cool. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, you can go ahead and share my screen again if you're not already.
There we go. Yep, we've got it up.
Okay. Yeah. So I just installation stuff. It's not very exciting. So I don't want to spend a lot of time here.
It's
But just
necessary though. So.
it is necessary. I just want people to be aware of these things, like especially the documentation and the sample project. Once you get your plugins installed into the right location, um, which I'm not sure if that part got cut off, but that was just plugins marketplace directory. You drop your plugins in here. I think in the documentation we actually, just for what it's worth, we say uh, put it in a NVIDIA subfolder just for organization, which you can do. You can take all these and oh, whoops, it's not going to like that because I currently have the Unreal Editor up. You can create subfolders in the marketplace folder, just in case you got a ton of plugins in here, right? And that's up to you, however you want to organize it. But yeah, that's where the plugins go. And then in the DLSS3 zip file, we have a sample project called DLSS3 test or NGX test for older versions of Unreal. And let me load that up real quick. I'll show you what that's all about. This is just a great way to make sure that everything is working like it's supposed to. This is a project where, if I go to my plugins and I search for DLSS, you'll see everything in this particular project is already enabled, and I can. I'm gonna. Certain aspects of DLSS3 will work in different viewports a little bit differently. So you can preview DLSS super resolution in any viewport, but frame generation will only work in either Pi or standalone build, or like in a shipping release build or something like that. It's not going to work in the viewport. It doesn't work under certain conditions like that. So, but if you're in the editor and you want to preview your scene under ideal conditions, the thing to do is you could use Pi, but Pi has a few shortcomings where it doesn't properly. It doesn't let you set like a full screen very easily, or it doesn't let you set screen percentage and preview that. So standalone game is going to give you the best DLSS3 like full editing experience, like previewing all the capabilities while you're in the editor. And it's got a couple other advantages too, right? When you run a standalone game, it's a separate process. So if anything was to go down with the system, it's not going to take down your whole editor, right? It's a separate thread. So that's kind of a good little bonus thing. Yeah, okay, so here I've loaded up the DLSS3 test scene, and you can, like I said, you can just very quickly confirm everything is working. Obviously, this is a very, very simple scene, right? And all we're doing is just confirming things work. But like if I've got the latest OS, Windows 10, Windows 11 installed, and I've got my NVIDIA drivers up to date, everything should be working just fine. And we can confirm that here. So, I can take DLSS. I can switch it just to like standard anti-aliasing, and see what that's like. Or I can compare that to NIS, NVIDIA image scaling. Compare that to DLSS, and see what like the different quality modes and how they look. Like I was saying before, DLAA is essentially DLSS without the upscaling aspect, right? So it's using deep learning algorithms to pull out details and enhance the image, but while running it at 100%. And so why would you do that? It doesn't sound like that would net any performance gain, and it doesn't. That's the point of DLAA, is to give you essentially the highest quality, like machine learning based anti-aliasing and image enhancement you can get without, like, say, upping your screen percentage past 100%, right? Like going to 150 or 200%. DLA will give you one of the highest quality images you can possibly get at native rendering. And so that's what that is. And then you see there are the different quality modes for DLSS. Some of this isn't. I'm in 1080p right now, so some of it's not going to look. It's not going to look very good at a really low resolution. In fact, at 1080p, we have an auto. So DLSS has an automatic mode where you can just set that, and it will set the right quality level for the target resolution you have. At 1080p, we recommend not going below quality level. That's like, it's either quality or DLAA at this low of a resolution, right? But we can look at that and see what quality looks like. I can turn on frame generation. And here you can see what the outputted frame rate is. It's obscenely high, right? With a simple scene like this, tells you how many frames you're presenting. In this case, we're for every one traditionally rendered frame, we're generating an additional frame. So yeah, if I turn that off, it goes down to 300 frames per second. Turn it on, goes up to 400 plus. Um, uh, uh, and over here on the side, we have some additional debug information. I can hide some of these other bits, and I know this may not be very viewable at the at 1080p, but here you can see like basically the host frame per second, which is your base frame rate, and then the generated frame rate, which DLSS 3 is making, and then the kind of scaling you're getting out of the scene, right? So I mean, you could expect, and we put this in we'll have this in the documentation. You can expect that frame generation, will give you a performance multiplier, anywhere from at least 1.5 times, but it could be over 2 times. Right? I've seen it just kind of depends on the scene and the content, and sort of how you're stressing the system. But you could be anywhere from like 1.5x to 2.2 plus x performance multiplier just with frame generation alone. But yeah, this is a good little test scene just to make sure that, okay, I've got the plugins installed, everything is working, I'm set to go. Like if it works here, it should work everywhere else.
Hey, Richard, do you want to kind of mention that stat info window if people don't see it? What's the shortcut to bring it up?
Oh, which I couldn't hear everything you said.
The stat window, in case people are wondering if they can't get to it.
Oh, sure. Let me get back into this scene just real quick. So I want to show that we do have there is a toggle to turn this on and off. You'll see it at the bottom there, the Control Shift Home shortcut. If you want to get rid of that, this debug information on the side, by the way, will only show up in like a development mode or in the editor. It won't show up in a shipping game, even if you've got the option turned on. It's really just for your development purposes. And the settings in the project. So under settings, project settings, you scroll to the bottom. There's an area for plugins, and from here you have preferences for both DLSS and DLSS frame generation, and you can set those things up. Like, do I want to be able to see DLSS in my editor viewport? And I've got a toggle for that, and you'll see it'll do a quick refresh, right? When as I turn that on and off, so you can see what the visual differences would be like. Or for frame generation, there's a load debug overlay setting, and that's how that debug overlay toggle works, right? You can set it there. Yeah, this is the one detail out of all these things where if you mouse over here, you'll see that you need to, if this is off by default, you need to do you need to do an editor restart in order to get it to load. But then once you do that, it'll work from then on forward. Excuse me. So, but yeah, there's some interesting project settings here in the preferences that you can set, including the allow the over-the-air update. Like I said, this will be on by default, but you can turn it off if you want. And you have independent controls on that for both super resolution and frame generation. So you can set over-the-air updates for one and not the other if you really want. And you'll notice this is one of the cool new features in DLSS Super Resolution is you have these presets that you can configure. So all this is as we've been developing DLSS Super Resolution, we've come up with different sort of optimized machine learning models for different resolutions and different configurations. And we think the defaults are very good, and you shouldn't need to mess with this. But if you really want, you can change the presets to one of the other ones. Now, like you'll notice they have sort of opaque names, right? It says preset A, B, C. It's like, what is that all about? If you go into the let's see, let's go into the let me pull up the documentation for that. So the
I don't know how you're
documentation.
managing so many windows all at once. I would be so
Yeah,
lost.
it's there's a lot to it, but yeah. So there's a DLSS programming guide in the documentation that details exactly what those presets are. In fact, if I just load this up, this gets very, very detailed, right? This document is largely if you're a coder and you're you're managing your own code and managing that integration, and you want to do a lot of custom work. But it's got a few interesting nuggets for content people, like the preset values. So if I in this document, if I search for preset, I can go to the preset section, and you'll see here we've defined what these are. Um, yeah, these were just basically different deep learning models that produce slightly different results. Like one will have a slight advantage on like lower resolution inputs. One will have an advantage on fast moving images. Some of them are technically outdated, right? Like preset A, it was the older, I think DLSS 2 trained model that we were using previously. The latest version of DLSS 3 defaults to preset D for perf, balanced, and quality, and preset F for ultra performance and DLAA. But like I said, if you want to customize that, change one model to another one, this defines what they are, and then that's where you set that setting. Just a fun footnote, you'll notice preset E is unused. I think it's like, in the course of doing, machine learning and deep learning training, you try out like a certain AI algorithm, uh, and not all of them pan out. So I think that one was put to pasture for some reason. So that one's blank. But basically, yeah, that's just like defines like how you can um, change these and control them, like what they do and so forth.
Mm.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, anyway, so yeah, you can set all your preferences for the plugins from here, and then we do a couple of local overrides, right? Like if this is for your project, but you're working on a team, and the project is set up a certain way, but you can do local overrides if you want things just a certain way on your machine. So yeah, but yeah, that's the test project, and you can see I've loaded things up, and everything was working. Um, I just want to call out one other thing in this project, and this is largely everything I'm showing you here is applicable to the current DLSS 2 as well. So, I mean DLSS 3, it adds frame generation and improved, super resolution and a newer version of reflex, but the 90% of what I'm talking about also applies to the current released version as far as like how you interface with it and set preferences for it. So it's it's good to be aware of all of that if you weren't aware those things were there. Um, yeah, so this interface that lets you select and control all the aspects of DLSS 3. We have a good blueprint example here that's commented, that if you're curious about any of the bits, like how we are controlling the AA modes or setting resolution scale, it's all right here, including the specific DLSS blueprint scripts. You access those in a logical way that you'd expect. Like I can just search for DLSS and get my DLSS functions, or because frame generation and the latest version of Reflex are housed in Streamline, I can search for Streamline, get all those functions. Technically, you'll see little tidbits here, like frame generation in code is referred to as DLSS-G, and that's because we hadn't yet. It was named in code that way before we had a product name, right? Eventually, it became frame generation, but during development, I believe it went through different sort of code names, and DLSS-G was just one that was decided on at some point.
Awesome.
Yeah, but you'll see stuff like that. So they're fairly easy to find and fairly logical, and there's not too many controls. But like if you want to do like really advanced scripting with good fallbacks, a lot of this is just very copyable, right? Like this is ready to go as far as just like take it, put it in your project, integrate it to your existing UI, and hopefully that makes your development life a little bit easier. But yeah, I just strongly encourage people to check out this project for very good and proper scripting setup.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Best
All
practices
right.
and all that. Yeah. And yeah, from there, I think I did want to show one thing in the documentation that was pretty interesting stuff. I believe in the frame generation quick start guide, we have an image here. Talks about what DLSS 3 is doing. This is also on our website, but it's just a good image because you might be thinking to yourself, okay, I get it. Like it's we're upscaling and rendering, but exactly when is the frame generated? How does that work? This visually outlines that pretty well, right? So if you're rendering your image at just hypothetically 50% input resolution, performance resolution, right? And then upscaling that. So you're rendering the scene, the frame at 1/4 of the total pixels, and then upscaling that for your super resolution image. And then the frame generated image happens after that, where frame generation works by actually generating this, the first image, and then it generates the third frame and holds while it generates the in-between frame and then displays them. And we do that because there's a bunch of information it needs from this next image, right, in order to generate the in-between image. Motion vector data, and a bunch of other stuff. So it's looking ahead, holding, generating this frame, and then displaying. And this is not uncommon in graphics anyway, right? Like it's very typically when you're rendering images to screen, you're not generating the image and then rendering it immediately. There's usually like a 1 to 2 frame hold anyway, and exactly how much is held back is sort of I don't know. It's like sort of an area of ongoing work, research, improvement, that sort of thing. So this is nothing too crazy, but because of the there is some added latency that this introduces. That's where the reflex part comes in to claw back some of that latency. Reflex basically works by reducing what we call GPU back pressure. If you look at your total system latency, there's a chain of events going on, right? Like there's latency when I click my input device, whether it be a controller or a mouse or a keyboard, latency from that to the computer to the CPU, from the CPU to the GPU as that information gets processed, and then there's latency from the GPU to the display. That's a whole round trip, going through multiple components, that sort of thing. And we can't control all parts of the PC, right? But what we can control and influence is the GPU portion of it. So that's really just what Reflex does. Is its whole intent is to look at any place where there's some inefficiency in the GPU chain and shorten that total time, that round trip a little bit. And like I said, the working goal here is to hopefully once you've got frame generation, doubles your frame rate, but maybe adds some latency, and then Reflex claws it back, and then the net effect should hopefully be that you're not making things any worse for yourself. Like I said, it's going to depend on the project. Some you might add a little bit of latency, some you might actually net improve latency. But that's basically DLSS 3 at a high level, and everything it's doing, to generate the images you see. And this is interesting too. In the quick start guide, there are some comparative images here. Let me pull them up full screen. Just want to show this real quick. This is a 4K native image, so 4K 100% resolution, DLAA in fact, and you can see it's only running at 16 frames per second. But this is an extremely complex scene. It's actually using nanite and like ray traced everything, multiple, I think about 24 light sources, very complex shadowing, lumen, pretty much the whole kit, and so not a great frame rate. Now, but keep in mind, 4K resolution, right? There's a lot going on here. This is the same scene running with super resolution, DLSS super resolution, in ultra performance mode. So just to flip back and forth between those two images, because they look nearly identical. There are minor differences. It kind of depends on, of course, it's going to depend on exactly how you nitpick the details. But if you look at, here's the native image, DLAA, and then here's the 4K or the 4K ultra performance image, running at about 4 times the frame rate of the native image. That's a pretty good jump. And then this scene here, same thing, but now with frame generation added, and it's a little hard to see in in the screen share, but this is running at 100 frames per second. So this is a really good example of a scene like this where you start out with something that's nearly impossible to render, right? This, in fact, I can pull this up in real time so you can see literally what I'm talking about. Yeah. So yeah, you can see there's every light in here is a light source. There's very complex, almost path tracer like quality shadows going on. There's a lot of very complex ray tracing. This is a scene in many ways that's not designed to run well. It's just running at a very high quality. But if I turn the FPS counter on, and I believe DLSS is already present. Now I'm not going to go down because I'm in 1080p. I'm not going to go down to 33% resolution. I think that's a little too low for 1080p, but I will try 50. See what that quality looks like. You can even compare it to, say, 100% native resolution, right? Visually. So that's 100% 1080p,
Wow.
and you can see 23 FPS. And here I'll go to performance mode, 50%. It takes a moment for it to refresh, but there you can see the kind of performance increase you can get out of that. And even if that's not your, this is just one of the cool things about taking advantage of DLSS from an editing standpoint, because even if this is not, say, the final resolution that an end user sets for their game, maybe they want a higher quality. It can at least help you from an editing standpoint, right? Like while you're moving the scene around and there's like really complex shadowing going on, I can set my screen resolution down maybe to a lower resolution than I even thought was possible, and use it to do like really fast complex scene editing. Um, make my development workflow a little bit better. So there's lots of potential uses for super resolution technology that's in DLSS 3. I've actually been talking for a while. I don't know if we need another break or if there's more questions.
Well, we have a ton of questions, but I've just been
Okay,
enthralled with everything you've been going through. So
sure, cool.
awesome. Yeah, we can dive into a few of those in the meantime, but thank you so much for walking through those different scenes. And I think especially that last one really helps to put in perspective the insane difference you can get in frames and all of that with, I mean, that scene was beautiful no matter what you did to it. So
Right, yeah. It's I mean, it is one of those scenes that, like I said, it's not really tuned for performance. There's a bunch of things you can do to a scene like that to make it run faster, but it's in its current form, it's really meant for high quality, right? Like, it's not quite path tracer quality, but it's in the ballpark of, or getting close to. So yeah, it's
yeah.
but that's sort of an extreme example. Now, if you're as a game developer, you probably would create a more optimized scene, and be probably a lot more mindful of those things, and get potentially even much higher frame rates than what I'm getting here on a 4070. Uh, uh, of course, there I wasn't even fully taking advantage of the full DLSS 3, right? I was just using the super resolution part. Um, that scene will go, like you saw, it'll go from like 16, 20 FPS over 100 when you take advantage of the full DLSS 3.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's possible to go much further than that, especially if you're starting with more optimized content from the beginning.
Yeah. Absolutely mind-blowing, honestly.
Yep. Yep.
All right, I've got a few questions I'm gonna throw your way. Some of them might have some slight repeat information, just in case. I know we had a
Oh,
few
sure.
people come in a little bit late who might have missed some of the information in the beginning, so I figured we could kind of rehash some of that. But
Okay.
the first one I want to ask is, would you say this is closer to machine learning AI rather than, say, what people might take as generative AI? Since I know we've kind of been splitting AI into different categories as it's been advancing.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'll admit, I'm not a neural learning systems expert. I'm not a machine learning expert, but these are DLSS is it's a series of deep learning algorithms that have been trained on a wide variety of images to understand how images should look once you um, upscale them, and you start with a lower input and upscale it, and then it understands um, how to enhance the output and produce a correct looking result in the end. And that's is literally years of training and untold amounts of data have gone into making that system broad and um, open enough that you can feed it any type of scene, any type of image, and it can produce the correct result on the other side. Um, so I mean, people remember when it started, sort of DLSS one or pre DLSS one, it had to be trained for that specific game. Um, and that was a lot of work just by itself. And then sort of the big innovation of DLSS 2 was getting it to the point where it could be sort of more universal, where you could just throw any kind of input on it, and it would produce the right result. Um, so yeah, obviously, DLSS 3 is looking to take that further. But yeah, I wouldn't characterize it as generative AI, right? That's another thing that's happening now that's um, fairly new. But who knows what the future holds as far as that goes.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like this in and of itself is kind of an example of we're getting to no limits, which
Right.
is mind-boggling.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Awesome. Next question we have is from Miguel AR, and they were wondering if DLSS 3 is, I know you mentioned that it'll be backwards compatible with different engine versions. Will it also be compatible with previous GPU versions, or would this be exclusively for the 40 series?
The super resolution and reflex updates, those work with older RTX cards. Um, the frame generation part is 40 series only.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I feel like it's hard we always want everything to be backwards compatible, but depending on what it is, sometimes it's just not possible.
Yeah, I mean, I can touch on that a little bit. I don't know, Zach, if you want to chime in on this too, but it's an interesting topic because frame generation is, you might think of it as just software, but it's more than that. It's relying on there's a hardware accelerated component to it that is exclusive to the 40 series. They have um, uh, uh, I forgot, what is it called? Zach, do you
It's
remember
the
what it's called?
optical flow accelerators.
I was going to say it's optical. I was like right on the tip of my tongue. Yeah, they have optical flow accelerating hardware that's about 3 times faster, I think, in hardware than the 30 series. That hardware is present on the 30 series, but just runs physically slower. And so for that reason, the LSS 3 frame generation is 40 series only. And that's where we're at today.
Yeah. Makes sense to me. Um, Next question we have, which is kind of an interesting one. It's sort of a hard question for me to ask you, but what
Yeah.
are any parts of DLSS that you think can continue to be improved, even past what's being updated with 3?
Oh, all of it, any and all of it. It's always possible. It is that's is, there's a whole. I mean, there's very interesting topics there because we've already seen reflex is not that old of a technology. We've already seen it go through a series of improvements. I think the version of reflex that got mainlined in Unreal is version 1.6. The version we're shipping, when we release the updated plugin here, I think is version 2.1. And we're always seeing improvements across all of our technologies, whether it be memory optimizations, performance optimizations, quality improvements. So from a imaginative standpoint, I don't think anything's off the table. In fact, I mean, that's part of the reason why I loaded up the Grandma's Kitchen scene, because with DLSS 2, if I showed that scene running in 4K ultra performance mode, it wouldn't look nearly as good with the older algorithm, right? But starting with DLSS 3, we made some pretty important advancements to the quality of ultra performance at 4K. Ultra performance was originally, with DLSS 2, was originally targeted only for 8K displays. And I think officially our documentation still says that. But starting with DLSS 3, there were improvements to that where we started to talk more about the idea that you could get suitable quality with ultra performance out of 4K displays or 4K images. Um, and I feel like that's been reflected in like user feedback from, say, Portal RTX, right? Portal RTX is one of the first titles to take advantage of DLSS 3 um, broadly. Like it's got all parts of it included, and I saw a lot of like user comments, people talking about how surprised that they put it on a 4K display in ultra performance mode and getting like shockingly good quality out of that. And that's an improvement to the algorithm, right? I mean, originally DLSS didn't even support 33% ultra performance. That wasn't part of the original scheme, and then it came into DLSS 2, I think around 2.4 or something like that, and we've seen it improve again and again to where we're at right now.
Yeah. And it's insane the difference that has come even just between these two iterations of DLS so far.
Yeah,
So crazy to think where it can end up in the future.
yeah. I really do think sky's the limit. I mean, we don't know, but it's this is a this is a big focus for NVIDIA, and there's a lot of people dedicated to it. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Next question we have is from 2D James, and they're wondering, is this compatible with NDisplay across multiple nodes? And if so, what are the limitations known?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I haven't personally used NDisplay, so I'm not too familiar with it. I get the idea of it, but I just don't know the answer.
Fair. Um, would DLSS 3 also work for VR?
The super resolution part does, yeah. Um, uh, NIS is also an option for VR. Uh, the frame generation part doesn't, uh, but there are certain things, certain areas of research that are interesting to us, right? Like, how can we make VR better? How can we make things like movie render queue better? Um, so yeah, these are, I'd say they're areas of interest for us and areas that we want to keep improving.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Next question is from, I'm gonna slaughter this and I apologize.
Oh, no problem.
Silvercraw, I believe.
Ah.
But they're wondering what happens if you add NVIDIA Reflex into the mix? Does it improve latency and UE overall?
Yeah. Reflex is always an option. Like super resolution and reflex can be used independently of each other. You could say, I'm going to make a game that only uses reflex, and I don't care about any of the other DLSS stuff. Um, uh, the only hard requirement we have, and the way this works is, if you enable frame generation, reflex is part of that. It has to be turned on. You cannot use frame generation without reflex. They go together. Um, that's sort of what the Streamline plugin helps to deliver. Make sure that two seemingly unrelated technologies cooperate and are sort of auto activated. So I think there. It's technically not possible to run frame generation without reflex. You wouldn't want to do it anyway. It wouldn't provide a good experience. Um,
Mm.
but if someone wants to, just like I said, just use the super resolution part or just use the reflex part, that's certainly an option to them.
Awesome.
Yeah, and
Next question.
I was going
Sorry.
to point out that especially if you're doing like if you're doing a heavily like competitive multiplayer game, or even as an end user, right? You might want to turn on DLSS super resolution at the lowest input resolution that you're comfortable with, and then turn on reflex as well. That'll probably that combination will probably give you the lowest possible latency. Maybe not the highest frame rate, but the lowest latency, and that might be exactly what you're going after under that circumstance.
Yeah, that's a good point. It does seem to be extremely use case specific.
Yeah, it totally depends on the type of project or game or whatever that you're making. Like there's uh, uh, yeah, different strengths and weaknesses and use cases depending on like how you want to optimize things.
Awesome. Um, Next question is from Woland, and they're wondering, since this is closer to machine learning, if they need to train the AI on the specific game that they're creating for using DLSS, or if it's a more automatic process.
It's automatic. There's no training involved anymore. I mean, we train the model internally, and that's where, like I said, you can just have the over-the-air updates enabled, and you'd get the latest model automatically. But yeah, nothing for the developer or end user to do.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's see. Doo-doo-doo-doo. This is exactly what I was talking about before. We're through everything you went through. Some of these questions have been answered through the way, so now I'm finding ones that we
Ah,
haven't already addressed.
sure.
um, Matthias is wondering, will you keep updating DLSS 2 for the 30 series and lower?
Well, yeah, I mean, okay, so if you look at it very technically with this DLSS 3 um, set of plugins, when we release this update, it is technically it's called DLSS 3 super resolution. Like if you look in the plugin version number, it's 3.1 if you want to get technical. But that works on all RTX hardware. That super resolution plugin works um, across the entire line. So uh, you know, it'll continue. The 20 series, 30 series, they're designed to run DLSS super resolution and reflex. So I wouldn't expect that would change.
Um, Overjump Rally is wondering, does DLSS 3 allow a different ratio between real frame and generated frames, like creating a frame every 3 real ones, for example?
No, but that's an interesting topic for sure. An interesting thought process.
Yeah, I had never thought of that personally till seeing a question, which is why I
Yeah,
wanted to ask, because it made me
there's there's,
curious as well.
there's always interesting rendering optimizations conceivably that could be done in an area like that, right? Because in VR you look at things like foveated rendering and
Mm,
variable rate shading and things like this, where you're trying to optimize what is rendered within the frame, or have variable resolutions in, from one frame to the next. Um,
mm.
so it's easy to imagine lots of different possibilities, but that's not a current thing.
Streamings is wondering, can the settings, I think the settings that you had gone through in the example project, be exposed in widget UI through simple nodes, or does that need more in-depth coding?
Um, I I'm not sure I fully understand the question. Can you try one more time?
Are they
Um,
Sorry.
talking about the
yes,
presets?
I think so. Yes.
Okay, so ask it again. I'm sorry.
Um, can the settings be exposed in widget UI through simple nodes, or does that need more in-depth coding?
Well, you change the presets. If we're talking about the presets, you just change those in your um, uh, uh, your your system preferences, your project preferences.
Mm,
Um, uh, and just set them there. And yeah, of course, if you set it to, from whatever the default preset is, let's say you like preset A, that's the older DLSS 2 one. Let's say so you set it back to that one because you'd like maybe some result, maybe it works for your project. Then as that any set over the air updates, as if you have that set, it will update that version, that preset in your build, in future updates automatically, at least until maybe if you decide to change your mind as a developer, right, and go back and switch to a different preset. But if you set it up that way, it would just be automatically improving from there.
Next question is from Eurist Games, and they're wondering, what is the memory footprint like when running with DLAA and frame generation?
They do each have a cost. Let me actually load that up. That might be. Let me trying to think of where I saw that. Might be in our, because that does get a little more technical. That might be in our programming guide. Yeah, if you want to share my screen, I can show you some of those expected costs.
Awesome. Got it pulled up.
Okay. Yeah, so if you look in the programming guide, this is the memory cost for super resolution. You can see that there is some, expected. These are GPU costs, by the way, so some GPU overhead involved. But I mean, the good news here is that you're also reducing the size of your frame buffer. You're reducing the input image. So even though DLSS super resolution has an inherent cost to it, typically you'll see your overall memory go down. It's not guaranteed. I'm not saying that that's an absolute certainty, but because you're rendering a smaller input resolution image, typically you'll lose, or you'll use less memory. As far as the cost for frame generation, it kind of depends on, I think, the size of the currently rendered image. I've seen it typically be anywhere from it's 2 to maybe 500 megabytes. But again, it's like if you're using the full DLSS 3 package with super resolution, you might be, you're putting some additional memory costs there, and then probably saving memory in other places.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. I think we've pretty much caught up on most of the questions. So if anything is popping up that y'all would like for me to ask, make sure you throw that in chat right now. In the meantime, I have a question from me that I'm curious about, and it is
Sure.
for both of you. So Zach, I'm going to force you to talk. You've been awfully quiet today. But in your opinion, what is the most exciting change with DLSS 3?
I think for me, it's definitely frame generation. It's like when I think about that, the first thing that when I heard about it, the first thing that came to my mind was it's like hallucination. It's the stuff of movies, right? When back in the day when people were like, I want to make this, but now it's getting closer and closer to reality, which is it's really amazing and mind blowing at the same time when you really ground yourself and think about what's actually happening.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing, at least for me, the biggest impact, the thing that I thought about when I first heard about it.
Mm.
And seeing it in action it's definitely, I definitely resonate with a lot of people when they say it feels like magic. I've heard like voodoo. It does really feel like that, because back in the day, everyone's saying, "Oh yeah, I'm getting 60 FPS. This is so great." But now we're doubling, those frame
It's
rates
hard to
and
argue with
even
that,
plus. Yeah,
right?
I
Doubling
think
your frame rate.
I think that's the thing that people are I mean, working in film for me before 24 frames per second, then we're going to like, like 48, and we're thinking, okay, wow, this is pushing it. But in real time in games, you're going way beyond that.
Mm, yeah. What about you, Richard? What do you believe is the most exciting update?
I don't know. I personally got really excited when I saw the quality improvements to ultra performance. Um, just because I know that that by itself is potentially a big boost, and that's not going to be like, not every user is going to want that. I totally understood, right? Like, some people definitely want like DLAA level quality or nothing, right? Like but we provide that option. We definitely encourage developers to build that into their app. So, um, it's I feel like the full range of options here is pretty powerful. You can use frame generation with DLAA. You can use frame generation, with DLSS at a lower resolution. Like, you can sort of optimize and tune and configure the range of choices to like suit what you want, like the sort of the trade-offs and benefits of various quality and performance outputs and so forth. So all that stuff is
Mm.
really cool. I mean, you know, I would have picked just frame generation if Zach hadn't already taken it, because I mean it's hard to argue with with
Yeah,
that. Like
sorry,
doubling your frame rate, you stole it from me,
I
but
kind of took
that's an
the big
obvious
piece
one,
of
right?
yeah. I took the steak
Yeah,
off the table before you
yeah.
gave you the beans and the peas.
I, I don't know. Like if you're just like in just raw like performance, you just want like ultimate max frame rate, uh then going with like frame generation with ultra performance and reflex on plus boost. That's one of the options with reflex. You can be on and then on plus boost, which is like you know maximizes any remaining GPU power to reduce latency as far as possible.
Mm.
That combination can be pretty killer, right? Like you get um, your latency way down, your frame rate way up, and especially if you're on, like I said, if you're on a 4K display, have a surprisingly um, like high quality image. Like you know, uh, this is actually an area where I feel like people need to um, just be willing to reevaluate your expectations with DLSS, as since it's been a constantly evolving thing. It's progressed quite a bit from version 1 to version 3, um,
Mm.
and it continues to improve. So uh, if you had a certain, like, DLSS will never look right unless it's like quality resolution or higher. With version 1, reevaluate that. For DLSS 3, you might be surprised.
Yeah, definitely. Um, awesome. There's a question here. It's not technically related, but I am actually very curious about your thoughts on it as well. But this is also from Overjump Rally. And they were saying, speaking of foveated rendering, in your opinion, why can't we have something similar fixed in a non-VR game? For example, like in racing games, you only look at the center of the screen for most of the
Right.
time, and things like that.
I mean, just my opinion. This,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
well, yeah. I mean, I'm impressed by the idea of foveated rendering. Of course, uh, doing that on a desktop would require some pretty accurate eye tracking, and it is a newer form of rendering. I kind of give development of foveated rendering a little bit of a break in that sense, right? Because the concept has been around. I'm not sure exactly how long, like maybe close to a decade, but it's still sort of in it. At the same time, it's kind of in its infancy, right? Like, from a practical standpoint, not too many people are really doing it yet. So maybe that is the future, right? Like maybe that's how we render on a desktop screen. Um,
Mm.
It'd certainly be cool. I wouldn't be against it, especially if it. I mean, as long as it works and runs great, then that's fantastic.
Yeah. Um,
I did.
all right.
If we want to go through it, I did have one other scene I wanted to load, and it was just to step through,
Please do.
um, uh, uh, at least quickly, like how just to show like how you can set up DLSS 3 for the first time on a art complete scene. This doesn't have to
Yeah,
take that long, but I thought it might be interesting from the standpoint of like blueprint scripting and just a few setup details that we haven't covered. If
absolutely.
you Yeah, if you want, go ahead and share my screen.
Alrighty. We've got it pulled up now.
Okay. Yeah. So this was a scene from the marketplace. Oh, hold on. It was just this one right here, the abandoned homestead. I thought this was pretty interesting, just in the sense that, well, it advertises itself right at the top as being nanite and lumen, so it's, and it looks pretty cool, nice and modern. Um, the developer of this scene said that it's fairly optimized, but maybe not the most optimized, and that piqued my attention, right? Because a scene like this, I could see it being very challenging to render with all the foliage and high poly artwork and so forth.
Hmm.
Oh yeah, I have it here. Um, like I said, we can do this. I hope very quickly. Um,
I'm excited. I feel like this is gonna. We're just going back into wizardry with this one. I can feel it already.
oh yeah, here. Let me pull up a stat FPS. So this is the scene running without any DLSS on it, right? So no DLSS 3. This is native rendering. Um, you know, it's running. I don't think there's anything outrageous about this scene in terms of um, what this developer made. Um, it's definitely a high quality art complete scene. There's a lot going on here. Um, I think it's is normal and expected that something of this detail level would uh, not run necessarily 60 frames per second out of the box. Uh, I did do a couple of quick additions, just so you know, just for full disclosure here. When I saw the scene initially, I turned shadow casting on for all the foliage. So I think some of this didn't have shadow casting before, and it's a fully dynamic scene, so um, make it a little bit more challenging. And I turned the lights on the interior. There's multiple light sources on the interior here, and I set them to be ray traced so that we would maybe push it a little bit further. It's got some big rect lights and fill lights. And I think he's doing that just to boost lumen just a little bit.
Mm.
Oh yeah. Okay. So anyway, this is the 5.2 branch. I've already put my plugins in. We did that before, so I can go looking for the DLSS plugins. There's kind of a cool. I don't know if everybody knows about this, but when you're searching for something, there's like a neat Boolean you can do. You just do one of these um, horizontal slashes. Search for multiple terms. Here I'm going to look for DLSS and NVIDIA or NVIDIA because I want to enable frame generation. This is the Streamline plugin, but it's in the plugin name. It's called DLSS Frame Generation, and you can see here it says that it's both frame generation and reflex bundled with Streamline. Um, and then here's the super resolution for DLSS and DLAA. And then I'm going to enable NIS as well, because like I said, it's good fallback for machines that don't have DLSS capability, but it's also your sharpening control for DLSS. So yeah, let me restart that. and hopefully I don't hit any like weird shader compiles or anything, and everything just loads.
Mm-hmm. You know, I gotta let you know, Richard, I've
Yep.
worked in and with Unreal Engine for years now, and I
Yeah,
never knew that you could do
slash.
the additional search
I
at
no,
the
no,
same time.
don't feel bad. I just learned about that one. I'm like, wow, really? Okay. And apparently, it works in other things too, like in like the level. If you've got like 100 sub levels here, you can use it here as well. Yeah, pretty neat.
It's like
Insane.
a cool like coding and or to narrow down your search.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's an Unreal 5ism or like if it wasn't there in previous Unreals, but if it is Unreal 5, and I'm all for it. I've been impressed by a lot of the little refinements. Okay, so we can just check things. I've enabled the plugins. Very quick check. See the DLSS super resolution plugin is there. I'm going to load the debug overlay. I might need to do one more restart if this was not on by default, but just FYI, at any point I can very easily turn DLSS super resolution on and off in the viewport by clicking this checkbox here. You can see it do a quick refresh whenever I turn it on or off, and that's just for previewing purposes. Um, but yeah, so anyway, same thing as before. I've got the plugins enabled, so no new scripting yet. I'm just going to relaunch it again in standalone mode and sort of get things configured the way I want. Yep. Okay, make that full screen. Oh, and yeah, so it's complaining about landscape physical material. It's very common in Unreal for something like this, right? I'm going to disable all screen messages. Yeah, so we'll get rid of that, so it's just not bugging our eyes. Okay, so I've got DLSS enabled, but I'm not taking advantage of it because just by default it uses whatever 100% resolution or something.
Hmm.
You can test for that, right? Like I can go R screen percentage, right? Test, and then return without putting in a number, right? It'll tell me what the screen percentage value is, what it's currently using. So I can go, okay, well, I don't like that. I want to use quality mode because I'm in 1080p. So I'm going to set 67%, right? And let me see if this works. Yeah, I'm going to turn on my GeForce Experience overlay. It's got a performance overlay tracker that shows me the frame per second and the render latency in the bottom corner. You set those preferences yourself by you go Alt Z and then performance, and then there's a little whatever this disk icon, the settings icon, and then you can set like what kind of details do I want to show. You can go like heavy on details, like how much memory am I using. In this case, I just want to know what the latency is and what the frame rate is. And then to pull that up at any point is Alt R. So Alt R to send it away, Alt R to bring it back. So yeah, okay. So I can see that going from 100% resolution, right? The GeForce overlay takes a moment to update. I've gone from 47 FPS, and then quality, and you can see that like, I mean, just my opinion. People can have different opinions. I don't see a visual difference between you know at this resolution. I don't see a difference between using quality or full resolution. It looks the same to me.
It is
It
very
might even
subtle, yeah.
it's any differences are very subtle, but it's hard to argue with that performance increase, right? I've increased my frame rate by 50% by making that choice. So that's good. And then you can enable. So we've got Streamline going, frame generation is ready to be used. So I can, you can actually just type. This is one of the cool things about UE5. You can just type partial words to get like full console commands. So I know I can type DLSS and space enable, and that gives me both my like enable DLSS super resolution and my enable DLSS framework generation. And then I can just set that to a value of 1, right? And then we just let it refresh for a moment, and there we go. And by the way, that when I did that, reflex automatically came on, right? It's like I said, it's not going to let me turn on frame generation without also enabling reflex. So it simultaneously increased my frame rate while reducing my latency. Again, I could, if you want to see what the difference is, it's like, what is the render latency? About 20 milliseconds, a little over 100 frames per second. I can go back to turn off frame generation, right? And we can see where, so it'll give it a moment to update. So we can see that the latency increased by, I don't know what that is, 1 to 2 milliseconds, a very nominal impact in this particular case. But I went from 60-ish FPS to 100-ish FPS. So that gives me
Wild.
like, yeah. So and
Not a bad performance boost.
right.
Yeah.
And keep in mind too, I'm running in standalone game now. Standalone game mode gives you a pretty good sense of quality and performance, like for a final shipping build. But it's not the same thing. This is kind of like running in development mode. So it's entirely possible if I went and compiled this into a shipping code, I'd get a further boost out of it. I definitely saw that with the city sample, like where in standalone mode in the editor, it would be about the same. It would be like 100 frames per second on this hardware. But then in a shipping build, it was like 130, 140. So that's not uncommon. You have to figure, running in the editor, there's a certain amount of overhead, whether it be memory or just running debug code or whatever it is that is not showing you like necessarily the final quality. I've definitely seen. I will say though, I've seen it the other way too in some projects where like you run in standalone mode to get a certain frame rate and their shipping code is like the same. So it just kind of depends project to project. I haven't figured out a rhyme or reason to it, but it's just something to keep in mind that this is not necessarily your final in-game performance. But this is pretty good. I went like, what did I start out at? I went from 40-ish, like 45 to 102. So it's about
Yeah.
this overall. It's like the same um, jump I got with the city scene. Very similar. This is like Lumen and Nanite, where it went up by about 2.5 times, about 250% by using the full DLSS 3. So okay, I feel good about that. So I'm going to do some very simple, not advised generally for game development level scripting, right? This is just to get going. This is very sort of hacky, but just if I wanted to generate a like a test build that I run for myself and just to confirm everything is working, or maybe if I just want to make this simpler for my own development without having to put in the console commands every time. I'll show you. You can do a search for, you just right click, search for DLSS, and you can, you'll notice there's only one enable command. There's an enable DLSS there. And then I can do search for streamline, that DLSS G mode, right? And then I can do, I'm going to set reflex. You can search for reflex, or it's also under streamline, right? Reflex streamline. So I could set reflex mode, and I don't have to do this, but I'm going to do this because there is the option of on plus boost. Like I said, by default, when reflex is enabled, it goes to enabled, right? Just on mode. But we think it's good to give users the option in the menu for boost. Like I said, boost is all it is just if there's any like leftover GPU power, like even a percent or two, it attempts to take advantage of that unused utilization to squeeze out any more um, render latency. Uh, that's possible. Now that might come at a cost of perhaps some frame rate, right? Like maybe you lose 5 frames per second, but you gain 5 milliseconds. That's a user preference, right? Um, but this is why we say just default to enabled, and that's the way DLSSG works, or sorry, frame generation works. That uh, defaults to just reflex on. So yeah, but like of course, if you're building out your UI, you want to, and we have this in our UI guidelines document, where it talks about these sorts of options. So let's see, there's all of that. I want to do a console command to execute the screen percentage. I can't see over my own thing. In this case, 67. I know 67% is quality. I mean, the different modes are 67% for quality, 58% for balanced, 50% for performance, and 33% for ultra performance. And if you set it to 100%, it uses DLAA. That's automatic. And just because I'm not completely crazy, just to show you this is possible, I'm going to set a little very quick branch logic. I can test is DLSS supported, right? Oh wait, no, that's testing a specific mode. Whoops. You can do that too. Yeah. So this is a very simple Boolean just to test, does the user have an RTX card? Do they have the latest drivers? Are they on whatever the latest version of Windows that supports, this feature? If it passes yes to all of the above, then it executes. And that's just, right? If it's false, I can just say, don't do anything, or use NIS instead. But here I'm going to enable DLSS, turn frame generation on. I'll set it to on plus boost just to try it. And set that. Oh, and let's say I want to sharpen the scene a little bit too, just real quickly. I have the NIS plugin enabled, and like I said, NIS controls your scene sharpening. So if I'm looking at this, I don't know if maybe this feels a little blurry to me. And I can just start typing NIS sharp, right? And there's the console command, and the value is 0 to 1. I think it defaults like 0.2 or 0.3. I'm not sure. We have that in the documentation, but I can just try like I don't know, 0.5. See what that looks like. That might feel a little bit over sharpened to me. It's good too, of course, when you're doing something like this, to look at it in full screen, or like whatever your target resolution is. So maybe I want to. Yeah, I'm just gonna go with that. I'm not looking for perfection here, but I just want to sharpen it a little bit. So yeah, I don't have to use a console command for that either. I can search for the NIS sharpness blueprints function, set to a value of 0.4. Again, normally in a user interface, you'd hook this up to a sharpness slider and give the user the choice, and set a good default for your project. But that's just basically how you control that, and that should work. So let's see. I'm just going to run it standalone mode.
Now I should see this forbidden blueprint in action.
Right. A little bit of live scripting. Hopefully I did everything right. But if this works, I should be getting, you know, 100-ish frames per second or close to it. Yeah, give it a moment to sort of catch up and update. I just, you know, it doesn't refresh right away. But yeah, looks like we're working. My
Very
sharp, I can
cool.
tell it's got the little bit of sharpness added to it. I feel very comfortable with that. I'm kind of, I'll admit, I'm kind of somebody who likes over sharpening a little bit. I know most people don't, but it's just my personal preference. I kind of like that look. Um, I know I'm the lunatic that yanks the sharpness slider up too high. Um, uh, but yeah, that's basically it. So that works. Like I could then uh, build this and pass it off to my friend or to a teammate or something and have a sort of there's no control here, right? There's no interface, but it's a basically working DLSS 3 implementation.
Mm.
That's really it. Yeah, I just wanted to show that to take a art complete scene and how quickly you can add DLSS 3 to it.
Mm. Very straightforward. Very easy to get that set up. Thank you
Yeah,
for walking us through that. Really appreciate that.
yeah, cool.
Awesome. Well, for anyone who might have missed earlier in the stream, the DLSS 3 does not currently have a set release date, but I feel like you can confidently say soon, TM.
Yes,
Right?
not yeah, it's not soon with like whatever years away or anything like that. We're in beta right now. We're squashing bugs. So as soon as we have a release date, we'll announce it.
Awesome. For anyone who's interested in following and getting the latest news in accordance with any of that, is there anywhere that you would recommend they do so?
Zach might have good suggestions on that one.
Yeah, we do. We have, we usually have our technical blogs that we'll publish where people can go to, and our team is working very hard to put out social media as well. If you go to NVIDIA Game Dev on Twitter, follow that. I think Richard has it up on his little dialog box there. But anything that comes out will be announced there, and working with you folks as well, helping us get the message out. That'd probably be the best. There's also some links in the description, I think, on the page in the forums, on the UE forums that initially went out for this session. There's 3 links that people can find there that will lead to. The first one is our Unreal Engine page for NVIDIA. So it shows all the technologies that NVIDIA is working on in conjunction with you all and Unreal Engine. Everything from lighting technologies from RDX DI to to DLSS. It should all be there. All the links to how to get set up as well. So that probably be the best place to find that all. We also have our own webinars as well. We don't run them as frequently as you do because it's it's not a big band. It's just a 2-man show,
Yeah,
but along with a few other important people in the background helping us out. But it's called Level Up with NVIDIA, and that also we generally tend to have featuring any new announcements or technologies that we have. Well, you can tune in. We'll definitely have sessions for that, and can also happy to come back on here as well to kind of parrot that message when the time comes.
Yes, please
yeah.
do. Always love having you guys on.
Thank you. Yeah. We usually on the on our own web show we frequently talk Unreal topics. Um, so far it's been like at least 80% of the time, because it's a lot of our game development focus is in the Unreal space. So yeah, I'm sure we'll be talking about this and other stuff in more depth as we continue to develop these plugins.
Awesome. very much looking forward to seeing where it all goes and playing around with it once it's released. But with that in mind, thank you both so much for coming on today. I know you're both busy people, so I appreciate you coming on and taking the time
Awesome.
to walk through this with us and show us some of these really cool scenes and these incredible capabilities that DLSS now has. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank you for
Thank you
having
for
us.
having us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of
Thank you
course.
everybody for the questions and so forth. We'll try to answer everything.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, everyone who came and watched the show. It wouldn't be what it is without you and your participation and your involvement and you just being here week after week. So, really appreciate you being here. I recognize a lot of you. I get really excited when I see your names repeat pop up again week after week. So, I really appreciate you coming and hanging out and enjoying development with us and all the cool facets that come with it. So, thank you for being here. We have another episode of UELFG tomorrow. We're going to have on some of the team that created Strayed Lights. So make sure you come hang out for that one. Very cool, beautiful project, wonderful game. I'm going to be playing part of it, and I suck, so that'll be fun. Come hang out and watch that.
I want to see
If you
that.
missed yeah, it's gonna be a good time.
Yeah.
If you came in a little bit late, and you missed any of the information, no worries whatsoever. We post all of our streams in video format that can be viewed on demand on both our YouTube and Twitch channels at unrealengine.com. You can also find all of the latest news and keep up with us on all of our socials at Unreal Engine as well. And last but certainly not least, please come say hi in the forums where you can keep up with us, meet other developers, join the community overall. Happy to have you there. So if you haven't already, check that out as well. But with that, thank you one last time for both of you for coming on. Really appreciate you being here. And I will see the rest of y'all later. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.